Hello and a warm welcome. In the name of the German Society, I would like to welcome all participants and attendees this morning. We are delighted to host today this talk about the developments in the venture capital world. And a big thank you to all panelists who accepted our invitation. I'm joined today by a range of founders and experienced venture capitalists. We have Christian Angermayer, the founder of Apeiron Investment Group, a family office investing in Europe and Africa, mainly during the seed and startup phase. We are also joined by Dr. Marlon Braumann, founding partner of Elevate 3 Capital, the venture capital arm of said Apeiron Investment Group, mainly active in the German-speaking countries. Further with us today is Dr. Florian Heinemann, founder of Project A Ventures, one of the leading VC companies in Europe. Then we have Dr. Henrik Brandes, founder of Early Bird Ventures, a VC investor with focus on European tech companies. And finally, Jörg Reinbold, managing director of APX Ventures, the pre-C investment arm of Axel Springer and Porsche SE. The panel will be chaired by Paulina Gernand. She's a sociology, politics, and economics student at Zeppelin University and managing director of the Female Founders Night, an initiative which tries to promote diversity in the entrepreneurial landscape. Thank you for coming. Paulina?
Thank you so much, Clara, for the introduction. I'm super happy to be back here at the symposium. Actually, 2 years ago, I was sitting in the audience myself as a scholar of the symposium, so I'm super delighted to be here now as a moderator for this panel. So innovation is demanded everywhere in science, technology, business, and society. The future viability of modern society depend on it. The resources, mechanisms, and sources of innovation are supposedly the holy grail. The urgency of innovation is amplified as COVID-19 takes hold of the world. So this leads us to the question whether venture capital is the perfect model for innovation. Venture capitalists have the potential to contribute to facilitate a progressive future. Nevertheless, the fixation on the most efficient processes and marketability of a product often only leads to so-called pseudo-innovation. And if we really want to achieve sustainable innovation, where should our focus lie? What resources and what mechanisms are needed? In his article, Marc Andreessen urges us that it's time to build. So we can ask ourselves whether venture capital is producing the kind of inventions that the society needs, or is it even their responsibility to build those? In our panel today, we will discuss whether VC landscape contributes to the decline of breakthrough innovation in favor of incremental innovation. And I'm very happy to welcome our extraordinary speakers. And what holds true for all our speakers is the multidimensional expertise, successful career, drive for innovation, and the very homogeneous first look. So I'm very much looking forward to a lively discussion and new food for thought. And would like to start and asking Christian whether you think or whether breakthrough innovation is your primary driver for investment decisions, and what role do you assign to incremental innovation?
Why is the guy who just woke up in America getting the first question? I was like, God, let it not be the first question. Like, give me like 10 more minutes. But it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Okay, but where do we start? So from my point of view, because I think everybody here on the panel is sort of has a different sort of a little bit style background. Like, so my family office, Apeiron, as the name says, is my family office. So it's my own capital. So we act a little bit different, which you can if you don't have outside money. And for example, not a fund term and the duration. So we have just my own capital. No reporting, no fund duration, whatever. While our we do have a fund subsidiary, a fund arm, which Marlon is actually running, where we also have outside capital. So it's a little bit two different sort of strategies. So Marlon can talk more than about what he's doing. So on my own practically family office level, we actually do a lot of innovation. Exactly because, for my favorite example, which would feed a little bit into your thesis, is, and my totally favorite thing in life, is that we started working on getting psychedelics, so LSD, magic mushrooms, and all the other wonderful drugs, legal again as a medical treatment for depression, anxiety, addiction. So when I did that and asked other VCs to join in 4 or 5 years ago, everybody said, I can't do that. I see the potential. It was not that they thought I'm completely crazy, but they were like, okay, what could my LPs say? Yeah, oh, I have Middle Eastern investors. Do they say this is like drug use, whatever? Yeah. So on the one side, I think you're right that there are some sort of breakthrough innovations which are maybe harder to do with venture capital, where you have sort of external responsibility for money, and maybe easier in my case with my own capital. So that's sort of my thesis point for the beginning. Wait, you are on mute.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah. So Florian, how would you compare those two alternatives in terms of innovation? Do you see that venture capital is only targeting a very niche and safe business models and thereby missing opportunity for breakthrough innovation?
I mean, I think as Christian said, I think that's an excellent point. I think a lot of breakthrough innovation takes a long time. Yeah. And we have fund duration. So even if you're an early stage fund, you have 10, 12 years of time. I mean, you can extend the fund, but it's if you do basic research, whether that takes 2 years or 5 years, yeah, that doesn't say anything often about the quality of the researcher. It's just if you take a wrong path in something that's really breakthrough, that can take you years without you haven't really done a mistake. And as Christian said, I think it's our goal is not per se to create breakthrough innovation. Our goal per se is to create value. Yeah. So, and that's the most important goal. And I mean, on average, I would say you cannot really say that this model favors incremental innovation vis-a-vis disruptive innovation. I think that's not true. I mean, if you look at 40% of the companies that are in the Standard & Poor's 500 index, to my knowledge, somehow were venture capital financed. Yeah. So they're all achieved. I mean, not all, but on average. And if you compare that to Germany or European capital markets, the ability of an active venture capital scene to at least create meaningful companies is definitely proven. Yeah. And I would say, does that always mean that they have to do breakthrough innovation or have to follow breakthrough innovation? That's probably not the case, but they at least have to build something meaningful, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get to a Standard & Poor's 500 equity listing. Yeah, just per se. And so, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily bad. I mean, if you look at how the US economy has benefited from kind of the tech development over the last 15, 20 years. So by tech, I now mean digital tech. Yeah, it has created the most powerful stock market by far, and it creates a lot of wealth. I mean, you can always argue how this wealth is distributed. Yeah, I mean, that's a different question. But I think the absolute amount of wealth that has been created in the US is enormous, and we in Europe lag greatly behind that. Yeah. And this wealth would theoretically also give you the possibility to do many other things that are a lot more sustainable or drive break. I mean, if you look at what Bill Gates finances today on, with his foundation, in terms of disruptive innovation and in terms of breakthrough innovation, but that's a lot more risky than something than a venture capitalist that could takes money from the outside world. I think it's not an either or, yeah. But if you are successful as a venture capital model or as a venture capital based economy, you can do many other things with this that might be outside of the model of the normal venture capital kind of model. So and it doesn't help anybody if we would start doing riskier things or longer term things or things that we cannot really foresee, because it would destroy value. It wouldn't necessarily have a great effect. So I think as long as venture capitalists stick to that model and basically say, we do what we think is best to create money for our LPs or return for our LPs, a lot of great things can happen out of this. And I think we've seen over the last few years that Europe definitely lags behind here. And I don't know whether the better model would be now to basically say, okay, as European venture capitalists, we have to concentrate fully on this breakthrough innovation. I'm not sure whether that would be a path that would actually be successful, to be honest.
And yeah, following Florian's thought, do you believe that there somehow is then a maturity curve for investors to focus more on innovation rather on Me Too products or processes, whether this is going to be sustainable, meaningful, this is left for interpretation. But do you believe there is something like a maturity curve for investors?
No, I rather like to think about this in like success dimensions and success paths. And I think what we as an ecosystem need to create is the possibility for great founders to start their companies and then be on a venture capital growth path, and us providing the right capital at the right moments in time and creating also the exit opportunities for the people who invest. And when you, I think, look at this in the US, it's a lot easier, or not a lot easier, but there's more companies are going public there. And in Europe, traditionally, it's more like you sell the company to someone else at a later point in time, which goes later and later, which is, I think, a good development. But like creating a global ecosystem is one of the quests, and then creating success paths for good founder teams. And we as APX, we are like super early in that chain. So we do 50 to 70 new investments every year and hope to support some very early stage teams with very good ideas that we then can co-invest with other investors together and help them to become successful. And I think the whole ecosystem we kind of like need to improve and create on a global basis, but we are focused on Europe for now.
Thank you so much for your insights. And Hendrik, would you say that the interests of stakeholder inhibitive to promoting the kind of innovation your fund believes in, or do you see somehow difficulties sometimes with the part of the stakeholders and innovation?
I mean, first of all, as said, we are trustees of other people's money. We carrying the responsibility for hundreds of millions of people who have given us their trust. And our promise was to create value, as Florian rightfully said. And this is our criteria. So the degree of innovation doesn't matter if we take an investment decision. On the other hand side, likelihood tends to increase with the level of innovation a certain investment opportunity has. And related to that, I think we can perfectly discuss what does it mean if we're talking about a breakthrough innovation. I think we tend to think about deep tech innovations such as, I mean, ESA Aerospace rocket company, then this, I think, is probably seen as a breakthrough innovation. But I think this is probably not right, or it's at least not the only breakthrough innovation. One can also have breakthrough innovation in the way I conduct a certain business model. If you think about mobile banks, N26, is that, I mean, technological wise, this is not really exciting. Business model wise, it is exciting because this is a retail bank operating with 15% of the operational cost of a normal bank. And then you can go even further and say there are other startups which are simply better with respect to excellence and execution. They're really doing with respect to technological innovation, with respect to business model innovation, they only having an incremental differentiator, if you want, but they are simply excellent and aggressive how they conduct their business. That can also be pretty innovative and can create enormous amounts of value. So I think I wouldn't limit our thinking too much on these technological side of breakthrough innovation. However, my sense is that, especially over the last couple of years, the pace of technological innovation has significantly accelerated, and therefore the opportunities in investing in technological differentiated concepts has increased, and we are increasingly prepared and excited to support these concepts, since they making increasingly economical sense. But that, at the end of the day, is always the criteria for us to invest or not to invest.
Thank you so much. So you talked about software companies or technology being attractive to investors. Then I would like to ask, Marlon, is there any social responsibility alongside your investment strategy? And I say this also with regards to the article of Anderson, who said we need to start building things. And if we see the Corona crisis at the moment, do you believe there is a social responsibility to not only focus on technology developments in VC?
Yes, I mean, in general, I guess everybody who's in a responsible position and who's in a position where he can affect change also should follow a certain social responsibility. That doesn't only hold true for venture capitalists, obviously, but also for C levels at corporates. Your question, if I got that correctly, also implies that technological ventures are not necessarily socially responsible. And I personally, I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't go that far either. I would just say that there are other alternatives too.
Yes, I mean, eventually, of course, when we look at investments, we often ask ourselves whether or not this can also have a positive impact on the society itself. I mean, obviously, particularly because the pressures that we get also from our investors, because as Henrik said, eventually we take care of other people's money or other family offices' money. Also, this pressure has been increasing over the last years, which is, I personally believe it's a good thing. So yes, we look at it, and that's definitely one criterion that we take into account. Is it the number one criterion? Probably not, to be quite transparent. I think that you have certain thresholds, and you have your personal moral and your personal moral compass, but eventually that's not the number one criterion. That's, I think, the most honest answer that I can give you.
Okay, thank you so much. And so we heard a lot about, of course, taking care of other people's money and therefore having a responsibility. And I would also want to clarify that social responsibility does not have to be only or can't be successful. So what I always find so fascinating about VCs is the data or also information that holds the VC as a whole with the different companies in the portfolio. So I was wondering, within this information lies also a lot of implicit knowledge. So how can networks within a VC enable or maybe create breakthrough innovation by reorganizing the different data or information that you got from your portfolios? Maybe Florian, would you take this question?
Maybe can I make like one more comment on this ESG piece, because I think it's very important to understand that, because we often get that question, especially from the young generation, and that's completely fair, yeah. But I think it is not only our responsibility because we take other people's money, yeah. But I think one important point is also to make our model sustainable, viable, yeah. So it's not only because we are so careful to take care of other people's money. It's also, if for our model to succeed, each of us, yeah, has to generate a return that is above that of the long-term return of the stock market. Yeah, so it's pretty hard to beat the stock market the last 2 years, I guess, as a venture capitalist. But if you think in terms of like 10, 20-year time horizons, on a stock market, relatively risk-free, you can make 7-8%, something like that. Yeah, if you just buy the MSCI world, whatever, global ETF, that's what you probably get. Yeah, so we have to be way beyond that, because the money is bound, or is kind of caught within our vehicles for like 8, 10, 12 years. People don't know when they get it out of it, so they need a premium for that. Yeah, so and I think it's important to understand that if we don't meet this threshold, people won't give us money anymore, and the venture capital model doesn't work. Yeah? So it's not just responsibility, it's also for us to be successful, we have to deliver a higher return. Then the interesting question is, with a stronger focus on sustainability, does it have any implications on returns? Yeah. So, and in the public markets, you see like statements of the Endowment Fund of Norway or whatever, they basically say, oh no, also with companies adhering to ESG rules, we can make great returns that are even above that of other people active in public equity. And to be very honest, if you look in the public market, in the private market or the venture capital market, right now, the proof has not been provided that impact funds, which they are called, like venture capital funds that would invest in sustainable projects or with a focus on sustainable projects, would be called impact funds. And right now, the proof has not been shown on a larger scale that impact funds would create similar returns to funds that are not agnostic to this topic, but that don't have this topic at least in focus. And I think that's very important to understand this. It's that people give us money for premium returns, and if we don't deliver those premium returns, we don't get money anymore, and we don't have impact anymore. And I think that's very, very important to understand that. Although I know it's not a very popular message, yeah, because I also get asked by our employees, guys, why don't you generate? We have to invest more into the cool stuff, that gets plastic out of the ocean. I get it, yeah, but that I can do with my private money, or Christian can do that with his private money. And Christian does, yeah. I don't know whether it's plastic out of the ocean, but I know that you do some stuff. And the same way that the Bill Gates Foundation does it with money they earned on Microsoft, on not being a nice guy for 30 years, yeah. I mean, this guy has been an asshole for 30 years, and now he takes the money and does nice things with it. And I think that's a very important discussion to point that out. Yeah.
And before you come to the other question, I would love to make one comment to this ESG stuff as well, because I think it's fairly important. And what I'd like to do is to structure the ESG criteria a little bit. I think in the first place, we have borderlines with our investments, which are beyond and outside of the room, which we think is moral and is right. Pretty obvious, no weapons, no drugs, no whatever. Yeah? Relatively easy, hard criteria, we simply don't touch it. But then there's a middle case where ESG criteria, I think, can even support the return about which Florian is talking. So if we think about climate action, for example, what we do is we write in each and every investment agreement. What we do is that we only give money if the respective target is committing to climate action and is committing to CO2 to the extent possible neutrality. And you can think further. I really believe that this does not harm our return perspectives. It's not in conflict. And we really go to the borderline to the extent where it starts to become questionable. And then there's a third dimension, and that I think was also addressed a little bit by Florian. This is where we start impact investment, where the return is not only a return measurable in money, but also in social impact. And we start to make a trade-off between social return and money return. We also do this, but we don't do that with the money from our investors, because there we have the responsibility to deliver a maximum value. We do it with our own money, with initiatives like Vision Lab, which is predominantly funded by the Early Bird Partners, where we help migrants integrating in Germany and so forth. So this is something that might even also create a return, but we cannot guarantee that this return will be competitive with what we could do with pure commercial investments, and therefore it's excluded out of our commercial activities, but we still do it.
Yeah, so thank you very much for clarifying the social responsibility part. However, I would like to address the fact that responsibility in terms of innovation can also be seen by reorganizing new patterns. And therefore, Christian, I would like to ask you, have a new mission with psychedelic drugs, with is somehow something, yeah, it's already been legal in the past, but it's somehow revolutionary now. So there you are doing something that is, in terms of the responsibility of innovation, that you're taking a high risk. And I would like to ask if you can share a little bit more, if that was easy to get investors involved, and about this project where you have a lot of new innovation factors in it.
Okay, well, that's a perfect example. So for that company, it's called Apeiron. So funnily, I was the founder, but because I'm also an investor, I could invest sort of to myself, which otherwise, by the way, that's a good example. So as I said at the beginning, to support your thesis, wouldn't have worked out, because so when I started the company, the only two people who invested practically with me in me were Peter Thiel, who did it with his own money, and Mike Novogratz, another big investor here in the US, who did it with his own money. And even Peter said, who's known for breakthrough things, he was like, look, I couldn't do it with Founders Fund because we just don't know. It is technically an illegal drug. Yeah, and Hendrik already said it. It's normally what you say. We don't invest in drugs. We don't invest in, yeah, whatever. So we just wouldn't know, Peter said, like how his LPs would react on it. So practically without private money, and if I hadn't had the money, most likely this company wouldn't have started. Having said that, by the way, it is by far the most successful investment I've ever made in my whole life. So, and if I look at my whole portfolio over the last 20 years, and I just went through it when you were talking, like, interestingly, I made the most money with these kind of crazy stuff at the end. So it's actually an interesting observation. So then maybe, by the way, three other things, just like, because like what sort of were points I wanted to answer when colleagues who were saying something. One thing is, this is a little bit the sort of not counter thesis, but everybody looks always at the VCs and says, okay, are the VCs daring enough? In Europe, I would say, are the founders daring enough? Because if I look at now as an investor again, I meet way more people in the US who pitch me breakthrough ideas, while Europe is per se a little bit more, it's getting better, it's getting way better, but like by tendency, two things actually. The one is like a little bit more copy. Yeah, but the other thing is as well, Europeans tend to be too easy satisfied. So my favorite example is like, if here in America, you pitch somebody, look, I want to build a $1 billion company. Today, this is almost seen like, oh, poor guy, like, or poor girl, like, why just a $1 billion company? Like, where's the 10 billion? Where's the 100 billion vision? Yeah, because everybody does a $1 billion company. That's sort of like off the shelf, like, yeah. So in Europe, if people say, hey, I can make a $50 million company, that is already great. Like, and people sell too early. My view is like they're too easy satisfied. And it, actually, my own career, like I made a company, my first company with 20, and yeah, when we were like $1 billion, I was a tiny shareholder. Like I was the third founder, the third wheel. Like, and we sold. My mother was like, hey, now you made it. Like, you never need to work again. I was like, no, I didn't make it. Like, it's just the beginning of sort of building our fortune. But Europeans are easy, like, oh, I sell my company for 50 million, 100 million, and then check sort of life goal achieved. So it's a sort of mutual relationship between investors and founders. The third point is, sorry, when I go through all these remarks, like, what is the biggest problem, I think, and I think Florian briefly mentioned it, is in Europe, the capital markets are practically zero financing innovation. So every single really breakthrough theme I have, we have to IPO in the US. Yeah. So we're gonna IPO the psychedelics business in March in the US for $4 or $5 billion. Yeah, after 4 years, by the way, it's an amazing investment. Yeah, we just IPO last night. This is why I slept so little. A cancer vaccine company, so which is trying to find, like, people find vaccines for viruses. We're trying to find a vaccine for cancer. Real breakthrough. You could never do that in Germany. I love Hakan, but like in Germany, we IPO a car, a Gebrauchtwagenhändler. Yeah. In America, you IPO a cancer vaccine company. That's a little bit the difference. Like yeah. So I think if something needs to change in Europe and especially in Germany, yeah, then it's sort of the end consumer, and it's both retail and institutional investors who are buying IPOs. It's a complete mess. So this is one of my biggest critiques on Germany. The capital markets in Germany and in Europe are a complete dysfunctional disaster, especially when it comes to breakthrough innovation. And then the last point, which is a great thing, by the way. So, but I do think we're going into an era of breakthrough innovation, where breakthrough innovation almost becomes normal. So Hendrik mentioned we invested together in a rocket company, which is considered, thanks God, breakthrough innovation, but it's all, meaning the guys would say, look, we're doing what TU München, where they are a spin-off, is just great to do. Like so we're going into this era where what we think like deep tech, biotech, like robotics, AI, space tech, yeah, becomes really sort of a recurring, regular thing, because that's, I think, what the next 10, 20 years will be positively all about.
And then maybe adding on that point, sorry, one last comment, Paulina, because Jörg made that point in the very first statement, and I 100% agree, and Christian just picked it up again. Now, we can easily ask ourselves if VCs dare enough in Europe, but however, I really think that you could also ask yourself if governments dare enough, and if the end consumer dares enough. Because as long as there's not a capital market which picks up an IPO from a tech company or from a breakthrough innovation company in Europe, companies are forced to go to the United States for an IPO. And at the same time, European venture capitalists always need to hope for a secondary sale to a strategic investor, because the IPO in Europe is usually not the option number one. And if IPOs in Europe were appreciated more, as if, for instance, in the United States or even in China, we as investors would also have another risk profile then. And then getting back to Hendrik, eventually, given that we manage most of other people's money, we could easily argue, look, I know it's a very risky thing, but we don't need to stick in it until the very, very end, which is then a secondary sale to a strategic investor. But we can easily bring at least some sort of our stakes via an IPO public. And this would change the entire mechanism. So it's not only that the VC is guilty, but apparently also, I think personally, it's not helpful if Olaf Scholz's #1 recommendation is that everybody should keep his money in his checking account. I mean, that's not how capital markets work, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, thank you so much for dropping on that topic. We will.
Sorry, Henrik.
Yeah, just
I think Henrik wanted.
Sorry, just in a bit, we will circle back to the point you made about government. But just one thing I wanted to mention, what Christian said. You said something about something needs to change, and therefore I wanted to bring something into the discussion. A quote from Janina Kugel, which really stuck with me during the last LSE panel, where she said, if you want to disrupt patterns, you have to incentivize it. And there she was talking with regards to fostering diversity into the company culture. So I would like to ask Jörg, especially with this panel, everyone, of course, how do you check your own biases in final investment decision making, and what role do you assign diversity for innovation, and especially breakthrough innovation?
Well, what do you mean with diversity?
Like, with diversity, I do not limit it to gender diversity. Just in general, diverse people that are in the final decision making of investments, of startups, just in general.
Yeah, I think we could have a long discussion about what diversity means. For me, it means colorfulness. It means like multiple dimensions of people doing good things together in a great team that usually consists of different skills and different skilled people. And usually also is reflected in different genders, orientations, heritages, upbringings. And so I think you have to look, at least when you want to do early stage investing, what we are doing is we look at how good does the team perform together, how well can they do all the things they need to do in order to be successful. And luckily, that usually means they have to have a certain kind of colorfulness. So they have to have, I don't like the word diversity so much anymore because it's associated with quite a lot of fundamental views. But like a Realo that I am, I truly believe that good teams have lots of colors or dimensions. And that's what we look for, because as some of you know, we invest super early, before usually when the teams come together and have their idea, then we start to talk to them, and then we give them a little bit of money and work with them and see how they develop, how they reach their goals, how they react to things working or things not working. Then we give them a little bit more money, and then we hopefully invest with others together, and then they turn into something really cool, like for example N26 or others. This happens sometimes, and it's the constitution phase of the team that we usually are not part of, but it's the close looking at what makes a successful team, and then looking at the patterns that you might see what makes a successful team.
Thank you so much. So when you say that you're have seen the importance of this topic, what or may I ask what you did in your role to promote or foster this within your company culture?
Yeah, hire the best people and don't like look at what they look like or what gender they have. Just look at how they fit into the team. And if you look at the APX team, you can do that on our website. I hope you will see this colorfulness that I was talking about.
Henrik, would you agree with the statement of Jörg?
I think I have two thoughts. First of all, VCs live from the outliers in which we invest. And I think the outliers are unfortunately not easy to identify in an early phase. And I think balanced judgment lives from the diversity of the participating people. Yeah, so the more diverse we assemble our investment team with genders, nationalities, educational background, and what have you, I think the more likely it is that we will discover outlier potential, not obvious outlier potential in an early phase, and the more balanced our decisions are becoming. So I fully agree with Jörg. Maybe the word of colorfulness is even better, and I think it is definitely something we would very much like to build within our team. I know in a second you're going to ask me what I have done in order to build that in our firm. The predicament we're living in is that the density of non-mainstream candidates for the investment team is simply lower. Yeah, and we still have the obligation to choose the best. And if I have a white male European as a person, and he or she is simply better than other candidates, we will still go for that. If we have a more or less equal performance potential, we would always go for the more diverse candidate. And we desperately try to support it to the extent possible, but it takes time, and it's not only the problem of the VCs, but I think it's also in the earlier phase we need to build the candidate pool, and that has to live up to the mainstream pools which are already there. May I add one thought with respect to the question: does VCs or do VCs dare enough? I think there's one important aspect which has not been mentioned yet, and this is sheer fund size of European VCs as opposed to what we see in the US. Risk is always relative to the pool you manage. If you are a very wealthy person with 10 billion in assets, you have an easier time to allocate 100 or even 150 million in an early stage company, because if you would lose it, it wouldn't matter so much. That has happened when the Strüngmanns invested in BioNTech. There is no European VC pool in that size. So that investment couldn't be done by a European VC, unfortunately. That doesn't necessarily say that European VCs wouldn't dare enough or wouldn't be prepared to take these risks, but given the fact that they have the responsibility for other people's money, they need to diversify the portfolio. And if you're talking about VC pools of 500 million or what is typical for the larger ones in Europe, you cannot do 100 or 150 million in one pool. And I think this is actually the problem we're facing. We need to grow the VC pools in Europe out of which we invest in order to be able to make more bold bets.
Thank you so much.
Just to poke into this diversity thing, because I like to be politically incorrect. Yeah, I think it's funny that we have a diversity topic on a breakthrough innovation thing, because that's one of the best things where diversity doesn't matter. By the way, in no direction, because I just looked it up. BioNTech. So if you want to have a new drug, yeah, you don't want the second best person who does the drug, yeah, just because maybe they are diverse. You want the best scientist in the world, but then it doesn't matter. Science is colorblind. Like if somebody presents me and says, look, this works, then the only question is, does it work scientifically? By the way, and this is why I'm pointing to breakthrough stuff you're discussing in innovation, because like, thanks God, we're going into these science times, like of biotech, of space tech. So if a space tech founder shows me a new rocket, then I'm not looking, has he a diverse background? The only question is, will this rocket fly? Yeah? And I wouldn't finance somebody who has a diverse background just as a pity investment, knowing the rocket will never take off. Yeah? So it's funny that, because this is and this is, by the way, also the great chance with science. It either works or not, you prove it or not. Like I just looked up the BioNTech founders. Yeah, these are two immigrants. Yeah, and husband and wife and a woman. Yeah, but thanks God their vaccine works. Yeah, and that's the only thing that matters. Yeah, we completely overestimate the topic. What would be a right question, but I think it's the wrong panel. Do we have equal access for people with diverse background to universities? So do they have the chance to get actually to the point where they present to the group here? Yeah, but it's really not our job to make social impact diversity decisions. Yeah, it's our job to find the best innovations. And hopefully, as Jörg said, the best innovations come because people are diverse and creative. Yeah, but that's sort of the consequence is the other way around. Yeah, people coming to us because they are innovative, and there I agree with Jörg that diversity makes you innovative, but it's not my job to foster that. It's my job to look at the best companies, the best technologies. Yeah, it's the job of society and other stuff to bring up, or like Hendrik said, like, hey, I might as a person.
Thank you. So before I let Jörg speak to that, where I strongly disagree with you is to take diversity as a given, and we have certain requirements in VC that have reverse engineered to great success, and this does not, and this great factors for reverse engineered great success does not look diverse in any pattern. And where I was coming from in terms of innovation is that where the potentials lie to get breakthrough innovation. And there I would see that there's a huge lack of information being invested in, the right science to be mentioned, to use those things to enable innovation. But Jörg, you also wanted to comment on this topic.
I wanted to say something very similar to what Christian just said. I think it's our job to be open, to not have like a selection bias, and to look at the best people, no matter like who they are. And I wanted to make a really small comment which unleashed a lot within APX. That was the one decision that we made at the beginning of APX, where we said, there's no need to speak German for anyone who works for APX. And this unleashed so many great people from all over the world applying to be part of our company. It's like just a little thing, but still unleashed a lot. But this is not the important thing. I think the important thing that we all can do is just be open for the best founders and make sure we don't have selection bias. But there's also a lot for everyone else to do, for the universities, for countries, for cultures, to really like allow innovation to grow in young people and motivate them to really consider an entrepreneurial career. And this is not, I don't think this is our like main job to do that, but our job is to be open and invest in the right people.
By the way, does anybody read the questions, or is it our job to read it?
No, I was actually referring to one. So Marlon, there was a question from the audience that referred also to your point, and I would like to.
Why are you so handsome, Marlon? That was the question.
I don't. Yeah, I just read it. Yeah. Thank.
Okay.
I completely confused Paulina now. I just wanted to make a joke, but it was like.
Okay, so the question was regarding to Marlon. How do you perceive the role of the government when it comes to setting the right environment for breakthrough innovation? Which policy changes would you implement if you could? So could you further elaborate a little bit on your third thought earlier?
Yes, I guess I don't have 90 minutes lecture time now, so I try to be as precise as possible. But for instance, if you look, and I mean, obviously it's omnipresent at the moment, but if you look at how the entire COVID situation has been handled by the government, and I don't want to start bashing the government, because obviously it's a crisis situation. It's super risky to make the right decisions, etc. And at the same time, sometimes if you look at it and if you see that. If you see that that lots of money was invested actually in rescuing companies which were already dead before the entire COVID crisis, and which ended up going into COVID with a business model that was just outdated, and still those companies were rescued, and those companies were rescued with an argument that lots of people work at those companies, so we wanted to save basically employees from becoming unemployed. However, at the same time, or we wanted to rescue companies for better times in the future, and there was like tons of money invested in those companies or in those industries and verticals. And if you compare those figures with money that has been invested in startup programs, in university programs, and eventually also directly in venture capital funds, those figures they outweigh the latter ones by far. And getting back to what Henrik just said, if you look at the reason why we as being European venture capitalists are not able to invest 50 million tickets in one single bet, one reason is that we don't have enough money basically, or that basically our venture capital fund itself is not big enough. So now if we see that, and again, I don't want to bash on the Lufthansa example, because this is definitely just way too easy. But if you look only at the numbers, and Lufthansa was rescued with, I think, 10 billion euros almost. And the entire, like all the number of venture capital invested in Europe is, I think, the half or 2/3 of it. In Germany is the half or 2/3 of it in one single year. And then you look, and getting back to the question, if Lufthansa, is it a breakthrough innovation to fund Lufthansa with 9 billion euro and get a shitty deal as a government? I mean, now Germany as a government is a shareholder in Lufthansa with the shittiest terms you've ever seen. And at the same time, like if you have taken not necessarily the entire money, but only a bit of it, and have invested it in programs, not obviously single companies, but in programs which foster entrepreneurship and programs which also foster brave, to be honest. This is one thing, and the other thing, and this is this very famous quote of Olaf Scholz, where I literally lost my mind when he said, "Okay, the best thing you can do is to save your money on your checkings account, and having the current inflation rate in mind, this just means you can take money and start burning it, obviously." And why would you do that? And I mean, obviously, in light of things like Wirecard and stuff. It's much easier in his position to say, okay, your money is safe as long as you keep it on your checking account, and if you don't bring it to the capital markets. But that's just not the right signal. And I understand that there are people with different risk attitudes and risk profiles than we in a venture capitalist panel, obviously. At the same time, I think that governments should incentivize self-responsibility, incentivize entrepreneurial brave and spirit, and thereby act as a role model. Sorry, that was more than 2 minutes now, I guess, but I hope it kind of at least touches the answer to the question.
Very much, thank you very much. And also, I have a question from the Q&A for all of you, which is, where do you lie with regard to Peter Thiel's opinion that we've only been seeing innovation in the digital world, but not in the physical? If you agree, why do you think this has happened?
I mean, I'm here with Peter in Miami, so I agree, but it's changing, and it was also because sort of the time was not right. Like, take biotech, take space tech, like sort of the real stuff is coming now. It's just like it's always, you have more anticipation of the future, and then it takes a little bit longer till sort of science really comes to fruition. But let's turn this around positive, because the other thing he said, okay, we wanted flying cars and we got 140 characters on Twitter, but now we're going into the era of flying cars. So it's happening now. It's just like several other stuff needed to be ready, like especially science, but I think we're getting there now.
I think I concur with Christian, and I disagree with Peter Thiel. I think we're seeing an increasing pace of new platform technologies. And while we had every 10 years in new platform technologies before the year 2000, I think we've seen 3 new platform technologies coming into play in the last decade. And if I now look forward, we will probably see 4 to 5 new platform technologies enabling a broad array of new innovations in the decade to come. And as Christian rightfully say, space or lower orbit space is definitely one of these platforms coming up. Quantum computing is probably another one. And there will be more. And we are just in the year 2021, so there are 9 further years to go in this decade. And I am absolutely sure that we will also see platform technologies in the area of in the physical world. What is the mRNA innovation base for the BioNTech, Moderna, and CuraVac vaccine? I think mRNA is a fundamental platform technology which will enable a broad array of new vaccines and drugs. And in my eyes, it's physical. So saying only breakthrough innovations are to be expected in the digital world, I disagree.
So maybe we could go to the last question from the audience, which is also in regards to everyone. So the Chinese tech ecosystem seemed to be a massive black box for European VCs. Do you intend to enter the Chinese VC market in the near future? And if so, what a great entry strategy for European VCs would look like? Would this look similar to the Sequoia way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're trying to do a bit. It is complicated. You can't do it alone. We do it a bit the Sequoia way. So we're looking for onshore partners with whom we can co-invest. So that's the short answer. But it's a complicated market for a European investor.
And you really have to position yourself in a way, what's your value? I mean, if you're Sequoia, yeah, it's a different story, because I mean, Sequoia is probably the most known or most reputable venture capitalists in the world. So if they enter China, it's a different story than if you'd enter as a European venture capitalist, because you have to add some value, right? So, and you have to position yourself if you want to be entering successful deals. And as Christian said, you need a partner, and you need to somehow prove why you're relevant. So, and I think that's not that easily done. I mean, if they would be interested in a bridge to Europe, that could be an interesting story around it. But I think there's probably opportunities that we can expand to that are a little closer and that make more sense. Yeah, to the Chinese and also to us, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, I would exclude China due to several reasons. First of all, I think we have an exponential growth of opportunities in our home market, and I define home market as Europe and maybe in an extended meaning Western world. There is a shortage of capital, but not a shortage of innovation. So lots to do here. Secondly, we try to stay away from regulated markets which are not following pure economical rationales, especially then if this is also dependent on autocratic systems. So for us, we would not even consider to go there.
Does anyone else want to answer the question? Okay, then I think we will go to the last question, and I would like to answer this question, that you all answer this question. And which idea or thought are you is currently keeping you up at night? Can you give us a little insight of, probably of your brain, what you're thinking about and what ideas you're looking forward to examine in the future?
Who first?
Who shall I go first? So what keeps me awake? I'm a couple of things. I think we are running through a significant paradigm shift, and I do not see that this is broadly understood yet. So just like when the agriculture society made their way into the industrial society, we're now on our way from the industrial society and the knowledge society, and that has enormous implications driven by technology. First of all, I think we're discussing a lot about capital. I think the relevance of capital is fading out and is going to be replaced by data and knowledge. We have not yet understood. It keeps me awake that we try to preserve and collect capital while we're not investing enough into the assets of the future, which is data and knowledge. I think especially the German government is not doing the right things here. I think saving capital on the cost of building infrastructure and data and knowledge is drastically wrong and is undermining the basis for the future of your generation. Second thought, what keeps me awake at night is that I think for the first time ever in mankind, technological innovation are becoming so impeccable for mankind and society that we cannot allow these technological developments to run by themselves. Other than Einstein said, so in the sense, whatever can be thought will be thought, I think we cannot allow every technological development to happen in the future anymore. And we have to find ways to control and channel what technology will be able to do. If you think about new longevity technologies with respect to life expectancies, it's beyond our imagination what is going to happen there. The United Nations think about maximum life expectancy of 120. This is, in my eyes, completely wrong. We're talking about multiple times of that if we apply the technologies of the future. And just think about what that means, also in an ethical sense. If you think about the impact of AI and the threat of the governance of machines over mankind, there is so fundamental impact is going to happen. And we as venture capitalists can see that happening and see that at the horizon. And we do not have yet the tools how to channel these technologies in order to secure a safe and prosperous life for all of us in the future. That keeps me awake at night.
But then we're really fucked, by the way, because a government which cannot order vaccines, you don't want to regulate. I don't think there is any capacity on any government level. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, by the way, on AI. Like, I disagree in terms of longevity. I believe we're going to be some 100 years, and I hope government stays out of it, because if I look at the competency and quality of governments around the globe, but including our own one, it's a disaster. Yeah, so I hope they stay far away from any innovation, yeah, and let innovation run, yeah, because everything else will be a disaster the more they are involved. Yeah, so I have a very, very negative view on that, because if you can't order vaccines, then stay out of the rest.
Sorry, go ahead, Christian.
No, so what keeps me awake at night? So I'm meaning positively. Everybody in the of the participants should consider thinking about. I can't say taking, because obviously they're still illegal. Yeah, but psychedelics, I think, are a big enrichment for everybody's lives. By the way, especially when it comes to innovation, you're all young, meaning all the ones who are listening. But one of my big things is, like, as Hendrik said, we're getting older and older because we, thanks God, get more technology to push our life expectancy. One of the biggest problems, though, is that our brain from age of 30 on starts actually declining in terms of innovation. So we have two problems. We need to think of how can each individual stay innovative, him or herself. But the other problem, by the way, is that we here in this call, meaning the panelists, but also the participants, we love innovation. One of my negative theories is, like, the majority of people don't. Yeah, this is why our world is, by the way, so much in turmoil, is one of the reasons. Yeah, because you have billions of people who cannot actually cope with an ever-changing world. So if I look at my parents, they don't want a new iPhone, they don't want a new app, they don't want rockets, they don't want to live forever. Yeah, meaning we think it's cool, and I do think it is cool. Yeah, but like a big portion of humanity doesn't actually, and it's going to get worse because the pace of innovation is actually just increasing all the time. So we need to think, how can we actually make billions of people sort of able to cope with the world actually we are building at the moment. Yeah, and that's going to be, as a framework, one of the biggest problems. I do think psychedelics have an enormous chance because they boost you back, like even in an older age, into sort of the innovative and open mindset of a younger person. Yeah, not just, by the way, mentally, like you can really see how your brain under a brain scan is changing back to the way it was sort of functioning in your 20s, which is sort of the height of your creativity. So yeah, so that's some ideas. Like, read a book if you want. It's like the best book on that is called How to Change Your Mind. How psychedelics literally changing your mind.
Are we just building on what the others said, but really quickly? I think what keeps me up at night, just short term, I think we have a quite crazy world right now, and look at financial markets, etc. And I really hope the situation will stay stable. Yeah, it's kind of absurd what we see with all the SPACs around, but that's like a short-term worry. That doesn't worry me like overall. But I think what Christian said and Hendrik said, I think if you continue that thought, and I think that's probably one of the biggest threats, the divide between the people that participate in this world and the innovation that happens and the ones that are not is just getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, and I think what we need to acknowledge is it makes the world a much less livable place, regardless of what happens on climate change, etc., which is also not great, obviously, at all. But I think even this divide or the gap between the participants and the non-participants makes the place for everybody a lot less livable world. And I think if you go to Silicon Valley, you can already see that. I mean, how, you know, the spread between the people that participate in this and the ones that are not is just opening up. And I'm pretty sure we'll see that even more. Will lead to the political situation we've seen in the US, but we increasingly also see with us that's really worrying me big time. Not so much for me personally, but it's I think for our children and also for the place, like how, whether we really, I think we have to find a solution how the degree of participation or acceptance of innovation is higher than it currently is, because otherwise I think the divide will continue and it doesn't get any better, and it makes the place less livable for all of us. Yeah, and I don't have an answer for that, but it's just something that I see.
Maybe Jörg, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can do. So short to midterm, I think a lot about the change from the now normal under these super weird circumstances we live in right now to the new normal, which I think will unleash a lot of opportunities for great founders. Long term, I agree with what has been said, so I won't repeat it. And we need to think a lot more about this and talk a lot more about this and create like meaningful paths for founders to grow. And all this is not actually keeping me up at night. I have a very deep sleep, but this night I actually was kept up by the twins. I have 16-year-old twin sons who have school holidays right now. And they were playing video games and were in very loud conversations on Discord that went through the whole house. And my wife and I woke up at 3 and at 4 and decided to let them play their games because it's their youth, which is kind of like limited right now because they have to stay at home the whole time. But I think that like short term, the super interesting thing is what will happen if we all get our freedom back, and what are the opportunities?
Why do you say if? That's all.
No, when, once. Yeah, that was my English. That was not what I thought.
Okay,
so
good.
Once. I think the word I should have used is
Thanks.
once. I'm like super sure we will get our freedom back.
Good. That's the reason why I'm in Miami.
Well, thanks for pointing that out, because this was not what I intended to say. What I wanted to say was, once we have our freedom back, what can we do then? You know, I'm very optimistic.
In the medieval ages, they had 1 year of orgies.
Yeah,
seriously.
Maybe that's one thing. I think also art-wise, we will see a lot. And I think we'll also see some like post-traumatic traumas that will come out in some people. But that's a topic that potentially Christian could talk about for quite some time.
Yeah, mental health is a disaster, by the way. I'm going to say I don't want to end on a negative note, but like, because that's one of our core topics, and this is going, I mean, it was bad before because of, by the way, technology and innovation. Yeah, because the world we live in is not good for our brain. Yeah, but like the whole lockdown is a disaster on mental health.
Maybe two very last thoughts, given that we are out of time. And as Jörg said, I couldn't agree more with all that has been said now by the other gentlemen. So much for diversity by the other gentlemen. But
you haven't asked me how I identify.
Okay, but there's two things, and one thing is, and this is really a thought that actually keeps me awake, is there's so much saying that basically Germany is like the future of Germany is fucked. I mean that we missed it, and that there's China, that the United States, there's Israel in a smaller scale, but eventually we basically we are out of the race. And what really keeps me awake is that I'm asking myself if this is true or if it's not true, because I still believe that in Germany we have lots of potential. We still have great education, we still have great universities, we have so many resources which are extremely valuable. However, I think many of us, particularly in Germany, have become complacent in a certain way, because we didn't have any crisis over the last 50, 60 years. I mean, after World War II, obviously. So, and now there's this huge COVID situation, and the first thing that happens is that no one really takes on self-responsibility, and no one really acts. And I'm not talking about health issues, obviously. I'm talking about economical challenges. No one really becomes self-responsible, but many people always try to rescue under the umbrella of the government, or under the umbrella of any subsidiary program, and so on. And I'm really afraid that we as a society in Germany have become too complacent. That's one thing that and not brave enough. And particularly if you look at the people who start companies, most of them they come from very normal situations. So they have a certain drive to excel. And I really hope that we'll have enough brave founders, and no matter whether they are female, male, black, white, whatever color or gender, but that we really have this brave culture again. And the other thing is, I mean, particularly now that I personally believe that most of the audience is young, and most of the audience is either at university or at least at this age. I think there hasn't been a better time to start off with a new venture or a new company, and it's much more insightful and cooler than starting with McKinsey or Goldman or you name it. So I think that's actually the best time of your life. Either if you want to learn a lot, because you will learn a lot, or because you want to get to know a lot of exciting people, because you will and you won't at McKinsey. So I think it's just a great opportunity. And so this is not necessarily a thought that keeps me awake, but that's at least something that I wanted to encourage. Be brave and start to follow your own company and your own ambition. And I think there hasn't been a better time than now, because there's lots of money in the market. There's lots of very, very talented people in Germany who just wait for being motivated. And yeah, that's some last 2 cents that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Marlon, for this encouraging last words. So I would like to thank all the speakers for this lively debate. And we touched on many different topics and questioned what innovation is and how the VC industry contributed to it, and also what influences innovation. So thank you very much for your time, and have a nice evening.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.